It's so common to feel fear as an investor throughout the different stages of the market cycle. Sometimes everything feels amazing and like you can't lose, and at other times when the market's going down, it can be super scary. So what's one of the biggest fears that you felt personally?
My biggest fear is pretty hard to put a finger on because I've felt a number of fears. I've felt a number of emotions over the last 5 years since I began my investment journey. But in the beginning, my biggest fear was losing the deposit that I'd spent hundreds of hours, many years building up, because there was no guarantees of the future. There was no guarantees that it was going to work out the way that I'd planned. And, that brought up a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and a lot of fear.
And so how did you sit in those uncomfortable emotions and sort of overcome that as a first timer?
It was really good to have you as my brother and mentor at that point in time to provide me with some logic and point me in the right direction of books to read, podcasts to listen to, and articles to follow on a regular basis. Because in the beginning, you do have a lack of experience and a lack of knowledge. So for me, it was leaning on more experienced investors that have been there, done that. They've operated through multiple different cycles. They've overcome their fears personally. So, following people like Michael Matusik and Core Logic here in Australia, following people like Phil Anderson and Robert Kiyosaki as well. Their content helped ease some of those fears and anxieties, but also just having a belief in myself that even if I were to lose it all, it's a learning experience and I can use that to avoid making the mistakes in the future. How about you though, Ben? What are some of the biggest fears that you've felt throughout your investment journey?
For me, growing up in the household that we did when I was super young, I think I've always had a fear of losing it all, or not having enough in my future and it all sort of going away. And so that fear has been massively crippling for me at different stages of my journey. And I think it's why I've pushed so hard as a young investor and I've taken on so much risk and debt, and also why I've made so many of the mistakes that I've made as well.
So what have you done, or what do you do to overcome those fears?
There's a whole bunch of stuff, man, that I've done in the last sort of 5-6 years that have massively helped. So I was watching a documentary recently and it was Jonah Hill interviewing a psychologist. Stutz. It was so sick. And there was this one point where it's if you're really struggling with fear, anxiety, depressions in your life, then he drew a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid is getting your health and your body back on track. So eating better, sleeping better, and moving. And then from there, hanging out with more people. I sometimes feel when I'm having an anxious state or I'm in a fear state as an investor, I sort of bury my head in the sand and just really isolate. But going and hanging out with other people has been very powerful. Other investors that have been there and done that, people that are older than me or people that have a higher risk tolerance and that know that everything's going to be okay. And then the last one is sort of in the pyramid, the mind. And for me, there's two things I've done there. One of them is to sort of sit down, and this was a trick from my psychologist, Zach, where I literally write my fear at the top of the page and write all of the fears associated with not having enough or losing it all. And then on the next page, I write everything that is actually the opposite of that. So it's I do have enough, and if it was all to go away, I've still got the skills and I've still got my family. And writing out 30 or 40 things to go, well, you do have an okay LVR and the market isn't going to crash and fall off a cliff, and sort of just logically processing both the fear side and recognizing that chatter, but then also the solution side and the opposite of that has been massively, massively powerful. But then the big thing I think I've learned in the last few years or the last 5 years has been both acceptance that there is never going to be a life without fear. There's never going to be a life as an investor without uncertainty. Just when you think it's all going great, it could change like that. And when it's going really bad, it can also change for the better immediately too. So you've got to remember that as investors, we're working with the 90% of people that are emotional. And for those emotional people, it's either fight or flight. It's either boom or bust. And so just accepting that that's how the market's going to be, and I don't have to get swayed by the blowing of the wind. I can be strong in my foundation. So what about you, Simon? Like, you know, since you've started to invest, we've gone through the Royal Banking Commission, we've gone through APRA, we've gone through multiple elections, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through Sydney and Melbourne declining in value by 10 to 15% twice. Like, how do you deal with all that stuff, man?
It's, as you said, you know, these things come up throughout a real estate cycle, and fortunately by finding very experienced investors like Phil Anderson, you start to realize that there's nothing new under the sun, and these periods in time have actually occurred in the past, and they're just due to come back up at the moment. So rather than personally attaching to those things, I kind of just accept that this is a part of the process. And same as you, it's just that acceptance. Once you become okay with that reality, you can continue moving forward. But another thing that I've done is I have a belief system. And that belief system is that I truly believe that property is going to continue being a really powerful asset here in Australia. I understand that the Australian government wants to see our population at 60 million people, which is substantially higher than where it's at right now. And with that huge level of demand, there's going to be some positive things happening in the long-term future. I also don't plan over the short term. I don't think 12 months. I don't even think 5 years. I'm thinking minimum 10 years into the long-term future. But when I'm talking about buying a property, I'm hoping to hold that until I can write it into my will and hand it to my kids or grandkids in the long-term future. So when you're not so attached to that short-term result and you're more looking at the big picture, it certainly eases a lot of those fears for me.
You know, I remember one day so distinctly where you found that 50 years of property data from Homely, and we sat down and we cut it up together. And what was interesting is that when you look at the total return in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane divided by the total number of years, they'd all done about 9% per annum on average. And that was just insane to see. And in that 50 years, I could see years where markets had gone down 10, 15 plus percent. I could see years when they'd gone up by 10 to 30%, and I'd seen 0 years and everything in between. And I think what I recognized there was a bigger picture. Like, I could see the woods from the trees finally and go, this is what year on year property investing looks like. But for those of you lucky enough to hold for 10, 20, 30 years, it looks extremely, extremely well.
And one of my biggest goals in life is to become the best version of myself. And I understand that these fears are constantly going to come up throughout my journey through life and as an investor. And I think you nailed it on the head. Acceptance is the first step to overcoming those challenges and fears and moving forward to become the person that you truly want and have all the things that you really want in life.
You know, so for those of you out there who are looking for like a true mentor and a true coach to support you on this journey, we'd love the opportunity to offer you a one-on-one strategy session where all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and book on the free strategy session button. And either myself or my brother Simon can talk about where you are today, where you'd like to be longer term. We can share our experiences with you, and we can help you work through your challenges so that you can get back on the horse and moving towards exactly where you want to be in your future without getting stuck because of information overload, or because the market feels scary at the moment, or the market feels too good at the moment, or all of the other ways that fear manifests as an investor. But either way, we truly wish you all the best. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already done so, where you can get great videos like this every single week from us. Please give us a thumbs up and share this with someone that needs to see it.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool,
spin.
bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice.
So nice, eh?
Oh.